Hello and welcome. This is Weekend Extra Edition. What episode it is, I don't remember. 10 or 11, I think. But that doesn't matter. This is a vlog, someday to be a podcast, where I discuss my experience of growing up and living in an off-the-grid, agrarian religious cult. When I say off-the-grid, I mean absolutely no electricity or running water. Not really any electronics to speak of outside of a radio or two. And pretty much a primitive lifestyle. If this is your first time here, delighted to have you. Stay and listen a while. If you like what you see, feel free to subscribe. Hit the bell, hit the like, and let me know what you think. Your feedback is always critical. To those who have been here for a while or a few episodes, you already know what we're doing here, so we're here again. Tonight's episode, I think, is going to be in a little bit lighter vein than the past couple of episodes. Which have been a little heavy. They've been a little heavy. Past several episodes, maybe. And following an experience like mine, it's easy to become bitter, and it's easy to get trapped into those, those negative ways of thinking, and just dwelling on everything that went wrong. I would like tonight to just kind of take a break from that. I was going to do another heavy episode, and then I heard I was driving home from work, and I was thinking about what I was going to do tonight, and it was going to be a heavy episode. And the way I've been preparing for it, I know that I'm going to be emotional. And like I said, I have my window down, and over the sounds of the light traffic, I heard the kind of bark howl noise that a fox makes, and then I thought, you know what? I remember a story about foxes. I'm just going to do something 100% different. So I'm kind of coming into this a little bit cold. Hope you all can stick with me through it. So that's where we are now. Let me check my notes real quick. See, where are we here? So, lifestyles and philosophies, ways of thinking, ideologies that require an absence of proof to exist, and where faith is the only currency that is used to purchase endorsement, there's bound to be some thinking that isn't rational or isn't logical. And that's kind of tonight's episode. There were a lot of superstitions and wives' tale kind of thinking that happened in community. There was a lot to do with the moon affecting like a woman's menstrual cycle, and phases of the moon affecting when you did and didn't plant crops. They used the old Farmer's Almanac, which as a predictive method is about as reliable as dice or reading tea leaves. Reading tea leaves would have been considered sorcery or some form of divination, which was sorcery, except my uncle's grandmother would look at her tea leaves, I guess, in the morning. So he didn't consider it sorcery because she did it, and apparently he liked that memory and didn't want to taint it. I don't know if I share any lineage with the woman he's talking about. I don't remember who it was, since he's my half-uncle. But that's an interesting side note. Anyways, just, run-of-the-mill wives' tales were frequently endorsed, such as carrots making the vision, your vision better, and if you swam after eating, you could drown because your muscles would lock up, and if you went outside with your hair wet, you would catch a cold. A woman who was pregnant, how the baby sat in the womb would predict the gender of the baby, and just a bunch of nonsense like that. As for things like ghosts and creatures of the beyond, some people believed, some people didn't. There was varying levels of skepticism, but there was generally a trend to believe pretty much anything. There was even claims of a UFO sighting where there was these weird flashing lights and then they zipped up into the sky, and I'm not going to tell somebody what they did or didn't see, but I'm real confident that it wasn't some visitor from another planet. And there's a few things like that. Let me see. I think I'm going to start, since I started out with telling you about the fox bark. I'll go ahead and tell you that story, and then I'll tell you a story about a personal haunting of mine, which I don't really have an explanation for. Don't believe it was the undead, but it's a good story, nevertheless. So my sister, when she was young, actually both of my sisters when they were young, the eldest of them, they're both younger than me. The eldest of them, I think, would have been in her early teens, maybe preteens, and my sister, the younger of the two, is 2 or 3 years younger than she is. But they were young. They had this little legend that they created when they saw a flashlight. Now, there was a dirt road path kind of thing that was about a quarter of a mile. It wound down a hill and then wrapped around, that led to one of the villages there where we lived, and we had a window that was facing that road. It was just across the creek from us. Before all electronics were banned, outside the radio that my uncle had to keep tabs on world news, so he would know what the Lord was saying. People who would go out, especially if they were taking someone to a hospital, or they had gone on some kind of shopping trip, or had seen relatives, or whatever they were doing, if they arrived home late, especially older people, would come down that hill with a flashlight. And one of my sisters, I don't remember which one, I didn't bother to check with them. I didn't have the time. This would have been a much better story, I think, had I checked with them. When they would see that flashlight, they would run around the house and dive under blankets and so on, and talk about the coming of the one-eyed fox. And I think that it started out mostly as play, but I think that they would work themselves up into a state where they were genuinely feeling some kind of fear or what have you. Fucking phone. About the one-eyed fox coming. They had this whole thing, and I believe, and I don't know if my little brother wants me dragging him out in public like this, but I believe that they terrified the shit out of my little brother with the story of the one-eyed fox that was coming down the hill. And they had this whole they had this whole mythology built around seeing the flashlight, and it was the one-eyed fox. I don't know if that prepared or fertilized the soil of their imaginations for probably, I don't know, almost a decade down the road from that, probably. But my sister was rooming with several other young ladies, and I think maybe both of my sisters were at this point. I don't really remember. But at least the eldest of my two sisters was rooming with some other single ladies. And it was common for single people to live together, just as kind of a pooling of resources, and not spending a lot of firewood or water in a whole bunch of different places kind of helped consolidate and run things smoothly, and then they could help each other take care of chores like cooking and cleaning and so on, which left them available to do other things. Anyways, they were living there, and my sister and her friend heard this strange noise in the woods out in back of their house that they described as a Baak-Baak sound. They were genuinely mystified and I think frightened of this thing, and so then they had this thing where they would just refer to it as the Baak-Baak, and that was kind of their cryptozoological monster there. And I had no idea what they were talking about, and of course I was intrigued, but I didn't go visit her that often. I didn't hear anything for the longest time. But eventually I did. I was over at their house talking or whatever, and off in the distance you could hear this bark, bark, and it kind of sort of sounds chickenish, but it's very definitely not a chicken. And I think that I knew right away. I might have been with my brother or somebody else. We knew pretty much right away that it actually was a fox and not some kind of horrible creature. But I don't know. It was funny that they had this whole one-eyed fox myth, and then they had the Baak-Baak myth, which that went on for weeks. They would talk about this Baak-Baak, and I heard the Baak-Baak last night, and I was too afraid to go out and use the outhouse because the Baak-Baak outhouses were the privy, and how this fox who was running around doing his little call was terrifying them and had them in their house. So that was kind of a superstitious thing. The one-eyed fox is something that's lived in my imagination, as has the Baak-Baak, since then, and I've thought about writing something on it. I don't know if I would incorporate it into a fairy tale-like story, but it certainly is a good idea. Let me see here. I may need to just go ahead and reset. We're going to go ahead and reset. Fuck it. Alright, so back to it. I think it's going to be a pretty short little episode. That's alright. You'll be fine. See, I think it would have been 2007 when this happened to me, and I don't have an explanation for this. I don't think it's spiritual or anything. I just think it's a very strange thing that happened to me. I'll back up a little bit. Probably, it probably would have been 2004, 2005-ish. in the middle of the winter, I was out choring, and it was sub-zero, bitterly cold. The wind was blowing, and if you're not from southern Iowa and you live in a happier climate than that, it can get pretty bitterly cold in the winters, especially January, February-ish, and sometimes December at the depth of the cold season. And I was going out to feed the chickens or some damn thing, and this little cat, a little kitten, was meowing and following me around. I knew that this cat had kittens underneath an old house. And, you know, I didn't mess with it. There was tons of barn cats around, and it was just a fact of life. And the mother had been absent, so I didn't know if I was fairly certain that they were on their own, which was also typical of barn cats to some degree. But they were fairly old, and I didn't think that they would have any problem providing for themselves, even though it was cold. There was a couple of them there. This one followed me around, so I decided, you know what, I just don't want this cat following me around. I'm not interested in a cat. I already had a cat at that point, and a dog for that matter. So I scooped up this little kitten and went to carry him back to where I knew he lived. And when I set him down, I looked over and I saw that the other little cat that he lived with, I think it was a female cat, that she had died and she was frozen stiff. So this little kitten was all alone, and I just left him there. He's a barn cat. It's whatever. I don't know if my heart is cold or what. It is kind of life. I mean, when you're a barn cat, shit's rough. So I went and I fed the chickens and came back, and the cat started following me again. So I carried him back, and then I walked away, and he kept following me. And the little bastard was so persistent that I eventually just said, you know what, fuck it, and I took him home. There was I think there was a one pet rule per household where you could have a single pet, but not more than one. I already had two, so I was already in violation, but I had them before the rule, so I was grandfathered in. But taking in three would definitely not be something that was looked at with a great deal of fondness. Incidentally, it never really came up. So I took this cat home, and I adopted him, and I named him Tuco after the character in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is a movie I'd seen, and it's a movie that I enjoy. I watched a whole bunch of old Clint Eastwood movies with my father one time. It was a happy memory. So I named him Tuco after the Ugly, because he was just this ugly little barn cat. I had a pretty strong bond with that cat, and I would set him on my shoulder, and he'd just ride there like a fucking parrot. I'd go get water with him and get wood, and he would just like climb up me and jump on my back. And I mean, it hurt, but it was whatever. So this cat was kind of my pal. In 2006 or 7, it doesn't matter, I separated from my ex-wife for the first time, and I spent about a year separated from her, and I was getting ready to move into a house. We were getting ready to get remarried. I'd been talked into that, which probably wasn't the best decision I've ever made, but it wasn't the worst either. I got 2 kids out of it. They're fucking priceless, but you know how it is. So marriage, there was just a huge pressure to be married and to have that whole holy marital relationship going. So I had moved into this house that we were going to move into. It wasn't actually in a village proper. It was a house that I actually lived in when I was a kid. That was next to. It was about, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile away from any village. But I'd lived there when I was a kid. I learned to read there. I made some very important determinations when I was 8 years old in that house. So I moved back to it, and that was kind of cool. It's a rundown old farmhouse. It didn't have electricity or anything. It was, just windows, doors, and walls. And a roof. But at any rate, I was staying there, and it was just me and Tuco, my cat. And like every night, there was weird bumping and weird noises. And the bumps that were under the floor, I knew that those were woodchucks that lived under the house. So that didn't bother me. But there's like weird fucking noises coming from the ceiling. And I'd check to see if maybe squirrels had a means of ingress into the house, or raccoons, or whatever the fuck, and I couldn't find anything, so I didn't think it was anything of that. Well, one night, I was laying in bed, and I couldn't sleep because there was like these vomiting noises coming from the ceiling, and it scared the shit out of my cat. Now, he's a barn cat. He did what he wanted to do. He would go out and kill squirrels and rabbits and fight other cats all the time. I think it ended up actually fucking one of his eyes up, and he went blind because of a fight. So he was a scrapper. He's a tough cat, and grew up in a tough world. And he was there, and it scared the shit out of my cat. He ran into my sleeping bag and was sleeping inside my sleeping bag, which was not something that he ever did. So it spooked him. And I was laying there, and it was pretty fucking creepy. I'm all by myself. I'm 3/4 of a mile away from anybody. There's these weird fucking noises coming out from the ceiling. It scared the shit out of my cat, who was arguably far tougher than me and far less fearless. And I think this is about the time we were also getting to Alex Jones and that sort of stuff. So that creepiness was on my mind. And laying there, I just had enough. And I realized that I was being a coward, and I was thinking, oh my God, this house is haunted and all this shit. And it spooked me really bad. So I decided that I was fucking done with this. Maybe it was a spirit. Maybe the house was haunted. So this house had a very small upstairs. I went up these creaky old stairs up into this claustrophobic ass upstairs, and the noises had died down, and it was kind of quiet, but it had been going on for a while. So I just sat down on the floor with my back to the wall, and I just said, "Look, I don't know if there's some kind of ghost or spirit or whatever the fuck in this house, but if it is, and you're here because of some everlasting torment, I'm not the cause of that. Your beef isn't with me. You're scaring the shit out of me and my cat. Let's come to an agreement and be done." And after that, there was nothing. No more noises at all. Slept like a lamb. My cat never came into my sleeping bag again. And that had actually happened for several nights. Probably should have mentioned that at the outset. Might have given it a little more credibility. But, at any rate, yeah. So after that, nothing. There was nothing. Not a sound came out of that ceiling after that. And I don't know. I don't know what happened there. Do I think it was the undead? No. But it was a weird coincidence, and it's a story I enjoy telling. So yeah, that's it. There's my two creepy tales from golly. You know what I just remembered? When I was 8 and we lived in the house that may or may not have been haunted. When I was 8, I was laying not on my bed. I was laying on a couch or the floor or something, fucking around somehow. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw this person walk past the window, like a totally black person. Not black as an African American, but like a thing made out of shadow. Walk past the window, and I thought that it was the landlord, but the landlord wasn't there. All of my family was inside, and I told my parents about it right away. We went outside, nobody was there. At that point, they, because of the religion, thought that I had seen the devil or an evil spirit, and there was all kinds of prayers said and anointings with oil and a bunch of to-do about it. But that was in that same house. Fucking creepy. So yeah, no, I don't remember any other really significantly cool, weird things like that. But that was a couple of different, just weird memories of the place, and so that's that. I just wanted to do something in a lighter vein, and I guess that segues into this. I'm thinking, I know that I have some stuff that's going to be emotional for me to talk about coming up. More about leaving, more about how I feel about it now, and shit like that. And just, I don't know, less lifestyle, more me sort of shit. And I'm thinking that I have probably 1 or 2 episodes left of this before I move on and start a different series, which I'll probably still keep calling Weekend Extra Edition because I like the name. And because it's kind of in a similar vein, I want to move on to talking about being powerful within yourself and how to recover from setbacks, how to keep your head in the game, and how I feel like I've pushed myself to a place that's successful, and that's an increasing, that my success is increasing within my own life. So I kind of want to talk about that. If you guys would like to see this topic explored more than just another episode or 2, I'm gonna need your feedback. Those of you that were there, maybe talk about topics that I haven't talked about. Remind me of stories that I have forgotten, because I probably would have talked about them by now, and stuff like that. Those of you that don't know me, I know that you have questions. If you viewed this, ask those questions and hit me up social media or here on the channel. My Facebook and Twitter are always posted in the little description box. And sell it to me. If you want to see this continue, sell it to me. Because at this point, I feel like I've talked about everything that I can remember and that I think is relevant, but I'm not where your head is. So let me know where your head's at. And if I can get some feedback, we'll keep going. I've already had a couple of episodes that have revolved exclusively around questions, and those have been some of my favorite episodes to do. Just because of your feedback, I feel like I'm interacting with you, and your questions have been fucking brilliant. So yeah, that's what's coming up. When I make that switch, I'll be moving to 2 uploads a month on this particular vlog as opposed to 4, so we'll be cutting that in half. I need the time to work on the enormous project and get that to where I go. If you haven't followed that very much, you should, first of all, because it's way more lighthearted than this. And number 2, it needs a lot of work to get to where I want it to be, and I want to invest in that as well, since this is what it is. So change is coming here and elsewhere on the channel, as always. And yeah, I think that's about going to do it. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I appreciate you being a part of that. And I like interacting with you. The camera seems cold to me. I'd much rather be interacting with the person on a personal level, but this enables me to react with many of you at once. And I appreciate that. I appreciate your feedback, and I appreciate your support. It's actually been good to tell the story. As always, like I said in the beginning, if you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to do that. And that'll let you know whenever I'm doing something, and you can enjoy the future with me. Outside of that, we're going to keep on keeping on. I would like to shout out my cousin, who was also in the cult with me, Trey. He is doing commissions, fantastic artwork, and you can find him on Facebook. His page is called The Art of T.C. Baldwin, and I will be sure to link that below. So if you need a commission, you need art done, if you're a YouTuber, can't recommend him enough. I know a lot of YouTubers who have actually used his art, and they all love it. If you're a fan of anything nerdy or geeky, if he hasn't drawn it, he can and he will. But I'd like to plug him. He's going through some difficult times and needs a little bit of support. And if you're able to do so, I know that he would appreciate that very much. Art is his passion. It's what he's loved his whole life. And supporting him in this way is twofold, not only financial, but also the nurturing of passion, which is very likely the more critical of the two. And with that, I think we're finished. So, from here, enjoy your week. Join me next Sunday. And in the meantime, live in peace.